Okay.
Welcome to another episode of Wisdom Wednesday, where we have different speakers coming in to support us women over 40. As we know that life can be challenging, and this channel is to help you to navigate those challenges and to support you in the time of need. Today, I have a special guest here to talk about relationship. We know this is a big topic around our age group, and sometimes we wonder, especially after a breakup. We have that thinking, are we really being able to find the right person? Is it so hard to find someone that is emotionally available? This is a topic that we're going to share today. And my special guest is Tzara. Hi, Tzara. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Martha. It's a pleasure to be here, and hello to all of your guests and everybody that's listening. It's really beautiful to be here today, share heartbeats with you.
So please tell me a little bit more about you and what you do.
Well, I'm a relationship development coach, and I help women go from unresourceful relationships into healthy, beautiful, attracting the kind of relationships they want. And it really starts with themselves first and foremost. So.
That is true, isn't it? Because a lot of the times that when we're stuck in a relationship situation, we often the first thing we lost is ourselves.
Yeah, because we're so preoccupied about what other people think of us or what, how we just want to be liked, we want to be loved. And so we chase after that kind of sensation of feeling, and we often lose sense of ourselves. And so it's a really big issue for women because we're conditioned to do that from a very young age.
That is so true. And I really heard you about that. So if I may ask a few questions to help us to understand today's topic, never date an emotionally available partner again.
Wouldn't
So
that
if
be
I
wonderful?
wanted, yeah, it will be great, isn't it? And I think that like I've been helping a few of our members as well, that we find that a lot of men are unemotionally available. And I'm like, is that true? Is that false? So, really good topic to talk about today. So, if I
Beautiful.
may ask you, can you explain to us how attachment theory impact our dating life?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So attachment theory is like, think of it like the blueprint that shapes how we approach relationships. And it's based on our early interactions with our caregivers, our parents. So it influences our expectations, behaviors, and our emotional responses in romantic connections. It was originally developed, I'm going to forget his name now, John Bowlby. And the theory was significantly advanced by Mary Ainsworth in the around the 1969, 1970s. And she did this study called the Strange Situation Study. So in really simple terms, the study involved about a series of 8 different short experiments in which a mother and a child, usually the child was around 18 to 12 months old, and a stranger are introduced together. They're then separated, and then they're reintroduced in this controlled environment. So imagine the controlled study room, basically, that's full of toys for the child to play with. The mother is in there with the child, and once the child's really happily playing and is feeling comfortable, a stranger enters and has a little conversation with the mother. She engages with the mother, and then the mother leaves the room for a few minutes while the child is left with the stranger. The
Yeah.
mother returns and the stranger leaves, and this is repeated about 8 times. And the
Mm.
child's reactions to these various engagements is what's formed the basis of the study. So from this study, Ainsworth was able to identify the attachment styles as being secure, anxious, and avoidant. There's actually a 4th style as well, which is called disorganized, and it's really a combination of the anxious and avoidant behaviors. Um, and that came along a little bit later on. But essentially, the secure attached child feels really safe and confident when the mother is present, and shows a little bit of distress when she leaves, but it's really quickly comforted when she comes back.
Mm.
The anxious child is clingy and anxious and shows this intense distress when the mother leaves and not easily comforted upon her return. And then
Mm.
the avoidant attachment the child shows this little distress as if there's nothing wrong when the mother leaves, and even might avoid or ignore her when she returns. So what they noticed with this child, while it didn't display any distress, internally their cortisol levels and their heart rate increased was equal to the anxious child. And then, of course, you've got the disorganized attachment, which is, like I said, a combination of both avoidant and anxious attachment styles, right? So it's just a combination. What really I'm trying to explain here is that this study really points to how quickly we're able to self-soothe and regulate our emotions when the environment or the things around us change, or we feel threatened, our safety is being threatened. So really, yeah, in simple terms, the anxious and avoidant styles are basically the polar opposite of each other. One chases after love and the other is really emotionally distant, and that behaves like they don't want love. So like you're talking about, you know, men being emotionally distant, they've been taught from a really young age, you know, this idea, real men don't cry. They've been taught to not get in touch with their emotions. And so we see that pattern of behavior really instilled in them. So what's really important to understand about these attachment styles is that both styles are they're seeking security in a relationship. So it may not seem like that on the surface, but both attachment styles behave in the way they do in order to feel safe and secure with another person. So what this means, right, is that the attachment style that we experience as children will be the same attachment style that we use as adults. And it's because it worked for us as children, right? There's no reason for us to question the style or even consider another way of behaving as a coping mechanism for attracting and giving and receiving love. But the good news, it's what I want to tell you, is that you can learn how to become securely attached. And this is something that we specifically look at in my Fly program in order to break these cycles and patterns. But the thing you need to start with is knowing what your relationship style is. So if you're anxiously attached, you might overly share your emotions. You might be prone to, I don't know, texting a lot and feeling the need to get as close as possible to your romantic interest or whoever that date is that you've got in mind. And that's especially true in the early stages of a relationship. If there was any type of boundary around the anxious attached, it would be so ghostly, wafer thin. It would be such a whisper. So in terms of general boundaries to an anxiously attached person, this is like a foreign landscape that feels really fearful. It's completely unsafe because it kind of gives them that sense of they're going to be rejected. So they've got really no boundaries. So we can think of it in terms of the space that is occurring between two people. The more space there is for an anxious type, the more fear. There is this feeling that they're going to be rejected or abandoned, which is what they experienced as children. So essentially, like the young child, they're not trusting in that space that the person is going to come back. So the need arises to overly pursue, to chase, to try and claim back that space, right? There's a real fear in there. But it makes sense on the other flip side that the avoidance style needs space. They need to be able to feel secure when there's distance. So they'll create and feel comfortable with, you know, big, sweeping, vague, non-committal statements, really non-committal boundaries. And they do this in order to feel really avoid feeling smothered. That's a real feeling that the avoidant people get, so that they can feel more in control when there's more space. The secure person, on the other hand, feels emotionally stable. They're really able to communicate their boundaries in a healthy way. They're comfortable with intimacy. They're able to give and receive love without fear of dependency. They're reliable. They're trustworthy. They've got a balanced point of view of themselves and their partners, and they're able to handle conflicts constructively, right? And most importantly, they're able to manage their emotions in a really stressful, any kind of stressful situations. I like to call them the golden goose of the dating world because they're like the golden goose. They're like the unicorns, right? So what's really standing out for them is that they're growing up in an environment where the primary caregiver is really aware of their emotional and physical needs. The caregiver's really present for them as they've been growing up. And when you think about it, the child's like, I'm relying on my primary caregiver for survival. I'm relying on them for food, for shelter, for basic survival needs. So for the anxiously attached child, there's this need for the primary caregiver to show up, but it's not consistent. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're really warm and responsive and they're emotionally really plugged into the child and tuned into what their needs. And other times they're not. So for that child, my body, my nervous system develops this anxiety. It's like, hold on, wait a minute. I know that this person has shown up for me. I know that they can show up for me, but they're not right now. What's going on? What can I do to bring them back? And that's the key here. The anxiously attached person blames themselves, feels like they have to be something or do something more. But it's the inconsistency with a caregiver's ability to protect and their ability to be present to support the child that creates that anxious attachment. So, you can understand the anxious adult has that need for a lot of reassurance. There's this fear of abandonment and can be quite difficult managing their emotions. So they frequently seeking validation from partners for their love and their commitment because of this intense fear they've got, right? They're highly, highly sensitive to their partner's moods, and they can often interpret things as being a sign of potential rejection. They may even struggle to fully trust their partner's intentions, leading to all sorts of jealousies and stuff, right? So then we have the dismissive, the avoidant style, which is one of the most misunderstood attachment styles. We've talked a little bit about how men are kind of bucketed into this for the reason that real men don't cry. So it's really important to understand the significant levels of neglect that happen for a child who develop these tendencies, and how important it is to make sense of the story, and in particular how powerful it can be to create a new pattern in adulthood. So these adult avoidant tendencies, they're kind of the tendencies can be characterized by independence, this discomfort with closeness. They're emotionally quite distant, and they prioritize self-reliance. They often prefer to handle problems and emotions on their own. They feel really uncomfortable with emotional closeness. So they maintain this emotional distance in relationship and often can seem detached or aloof. They struggle to express their emotions. What's really interesting though is that 50%, I think it's even more now, but let's just say in general terms, 50% of the general population are actually securely attached, which means that the other 50% is leaving an almost equal split between anxious and avoidance. Anxious people being 25%, avoidance being 20%, and anxious avoidant being 5%. So this is, if you're in the dating pool, you might wonder, well, why are they the golden goose of the dating world then? It's because the anxiously attached people maintain healthy relationships over the long term. They don't tend to be in the dating pool, which is why they're the golden goose, right? So it's super important to do the necessary work on ourselves and in order to become securely attached. And that's what I work on my clients through the FLY program. First, love yourself.
That sounds like very true and in alignment to a lot of people that I've been helping. I can see that like everyone's have different attachment style, like how you explain it, and then also how that golden goose that you actually mentioned, that person that was content. While you're speaking, I'm like, let me work out myself with my partner because like we're going really well together. But sometimes I can see myself being in that anxious style, wanting that validation, wanting that thing. And other times I'm like, yeah, let him do what he wants. He wants space, give him exactly his taste of his own medicine. That's basically my style into doing it. Because I believe like in the sense of a attraction. If you keep feeding someone something, they will never seems to know there's a lack. So like, how would you actually deal with people that who constantly feel like that they have to be the one that chase instead of letting people, like letting the guy do the chasing?
But it's more, if we're just focusing on the attachment style, it's more about being comfortable with that space. And so this is a real fear for the anxiously attached. They feel really it's a rejection themselves because they experience that off-on level of neglect as children, right?
Yes.
And so whenever there's these little slight changes, they immediately want to go forward for it.
Yeah.
And so they're blaming themselves for anything that occurs in the relationship, and that creates that negative cognitive bias for them that becomes self-fulfilling. So maybe if I explain a little bit of how they get activated in relationships,
Yep, that was good.
it would be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, that's how the anxiously attached need to be able to be comfortable with that space. Where so the avoidant people, where the anxious people tend to blame themselves, the avoidant people blame their partners,
Yeah.
right? They actually avoid taking responsibility for. So I see you're smiling there. You've got that experience yourself, right?
I see a lot of blame outside. Like, it's not a fault, it's not a label, but until we realize that we are doing the blaming, we can't actually start that process of getting better and realizing what we are really doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that a lot of the times that when we are in a situation that we don't know what to do, we don't know how we can actually get better, that's when that attachment style understanding can actually make a huge difference. A lot of the times that when we feel like that, oh, we need to chase someone, on the other side, beside of anxiety, we actually also feel the need of being heard. We need to feel like that, oh, I needed to have that feeling of being understood. I need to have that feeling of being noticed, because other than that, I feel like that I am not doing enough for my relationship. I'm not doing the things that I should be doing. And I think that is a very real factor for us to realize and have a look into. So, yep, Tanya's back. Hi, you're back. That's okay, you're muted.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, that's okay. I feel in the spot that while we're not here, we're just talking about like not understanding the fact that both of us actually have responsibility, but a lot of us do actually choose to blame the other person instead. So in that case, like, tell us more about it.
Yeah, so I do apologize for that. So we've got these anxious people and the avoidant people, and they're triggering each other, right? They're constantly in this loop where they're blaming and taking responsibility, not taking responsibility, or blaming the other and then taking responsibility. So you've got this loop happening, right? So what's really interesting is that avoidant people don't tend to date other avoidant people for too long, which means if you're in the dating pool that you've probably dated an anxious or an avoidant person, and like I said, quite rarely to have dated a secure person, right? So when an anxious person is activated, it becomes much, much harder for them to realize that they're being triggered, as they've got this association that this activation is a prerequisite for love. It's what they learned to associate with love when they were children, from that inconsistency as their caregiver. So they're looking for that, that lightning bolt of love, that instant attraction. But it's often just a feeling of their attachment being triggered, and they don't realize it, right? So I want to share with you this study that was done to discover how sensitive people with this attachment style are to social cues, right? So it's really, really interesting, because when the anxious person really understands what their superpower is, it can change things on a dramatic level. So if you imagine this, what they call the morph movie technique, imagine a face that's showing a specific emotion, let's say anger, and then it gradually morphs into a more neutral expression, and then vice versa, from a neutral expression to, say, anger. So the participants had to stop the movie at the point that they believed the original emotion had dissipated. So people with an anxious attachment style were more likely to perceive this offset, because it's what they've learned to be aware of the social cues, because their very life depended on it. Their very, their security depended on it. So people with an anxious attachment style are much more vigilant to the changes in other people's emotion expressions, right? But the problem is that they usually assume that these changes are to do with them. They think something negative about it. My partner's ignoring me, therefore I've done something wrong. And that's what creates this activated loop. It creates this activated attachment style. When the experiment was designed in a way for the anxious partners to wait a few minutes to actually engage in a bit of space, right? It was really interesting that when they were asked not to immediately respond when they spotted this change, but to wait for more information, they had this tremendous advantage over the other participants, because they've got this uncanny ability to decipher the world around them, their environment. It's going to arm them with a lot more ability to have a better conversation rather than blaming themselves, right? So the key, if you're experiencing an anxious attachment, is just to slow down and arm yourself with more knowledge, because your attachment style is going to activate you, and you're going to remain in a loop that's really hard to get out of, making misjudgments and hurting yourself. So the main problem for the anxious attachment style is, as I said, is not leaving any room or any possibility for separation or space. And it's obviously not being done intentionally. It's a blind spot. It's creating this chronic activation loop. And this is where the activation system is doing the one thing that gets them the direct opposite of what they want out of the relationships. It's pushing people away, right? It's pushing them, and creates this anxious attachment loop. So they can get used to being really chronically activated, and it's going to operate outside of their awareness. When they come to this heightened and erratic emotions, they're going to think that that's normal, and it's not. So they're looking for that in a partner, and a partner that's emotionally unavailable is going to trigger that attachment style for them. So they feel like, this is the lightning bolt, I'm feeling this. They're going to start chasing these little crumbs of love, which is, it's a behavior pattern of this push-pull dance. Does
That
that
is so
make sense?
true. That is so true, because it is that pull and want thing in the relationship that a lot of people find it hard to actually navigate. So if I'm going to ask you, what are the three biggest steps someone can take from their secure from to form a secure relationship? What will be the three biggest steps that someone can do now, knowing what you just said?
Yeah, beautiful. Great. A great question. I'm actually going to give you 5 steps, because I think it's really important. But so the first one, for the anxious avoidance, right? For all of the anxious people out there, learn not to panic. That's the first thing, right? When you sense that something will be wrong, and this is your superpower to sense that, try not to react or act immediately. The key is to just really pause and breathe. So the first key is try not to panic. The second is to take responsibility for your emotions. Wanting changes in these social cues is going to make you feel safe, and it's a way of relying on others for your emotional security. So just remember, you're not a child anymore, and you can take charge of your own feelings. So take responsibility for your own emotions. The third one is to normalize that separation, understanding that having space between you and your partner is normal, and it doesn't mean that the relationship is in any danger whatsoever. So this is about regulating yourself and managing your emotions effectively. Essentially being comfortable with the discomfort. So that's going to be a huge step for you. And then fourthly, being body aware. When you think of someone, as if someone is upset with you, take a moment and just notice where you're feeling that anxiety in your body. Because when you can name it in the body, it's going to give you some more control over it. It's not until we feel it in the body that we can become aware, and that's when we get control. So just name it. It's a really simple step. And then fifthly, just communicate after your regulation. Once you've calmed down and acknowledged your feelings, go and communicate what you've experienced. Your needs and wants are just as valid. But the key here is to not rush in straight away. If you've got an anxious tendency, your superpower is going to be aware of these subtle changes. So just use that awareness to take your time and approach things calmly. And then for all the avoidance out there, if you're avoiding watching this, this is for you. So the first one will be to acknowledge your fear of intimacy. This is a real thing, right? Recognize that your tendency to distance yourself is a response to a fear of getting hurt. And understand that this fear is a step to be overcome. So that's your first thing. If you can get to a point where you acknowledge that fear, it's monumental for an avoidant person. And then try and practice some emotional vulnerability, just to gradually allow yourself to be more open with your partner and share your thoughts and feelings. This is going to be a really uncomfortable thing for you. So again, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Thirdly, challenge the negative beliefs. Work on identifying any challenging beliefs that you're keeping yourself distance. If you've got a belief that that needing someone is going to make you feel weak or vulnerable, that's a belief that needs to be changed. And fourthly, create some small connections. Start really, really small. Consistent gestures of intimacy. This could be on a consistent level. It could be something simple like a touch or a kind word, just spending some small quality time together. And then fifthly, stay present. Focus on staying in the moment rather than worrying about your potential future problems. This mindfulness is going to help you appreciate the current situation and build trust over time. So these are the foundational steps that I cover, and I go into a lot more detail in my program. Participants or my clients will really learn the practical tools and techniques to transform their attachment styles and really foster healthier, more secure relationships.
That is
So
just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I'm loving it. It is just like, it's an eye opener. And I can already think of a few person that I can actually send this recording to. To let
beautiful.
people know that, like, there is so much. So please tell us a little bit more about your program and how people reach out to you and the special offer that you have for our audience here today.
Yes, so this is a new resource. It's called the Fly program, my first Love Yourself program, where we really, really take a deep dive into implementing some proven steps that individuals can start creating the love that they deserve, rather than falling into these old sort of insecure patterns. So my intention is to really help people get out of the dating pool and becoming more secure in themselves so they can attract an equally secure partner. And that's what my Fly program is all about. And because you've shown up or you're watching this today, I'm doing a beautiful offer of 10% for all of the YTG 40 plus members. I think I've shared that with you, the link, Martha, if you want to share that with your people. All you have to do, if you go onto the link, if you're interested in this in any way, is put the code in YTG40. Unfortunately, my little my operating system wouldn't allow the plus sign in this, so it's got to be done without the plus sign. I do apologize. It wouldn't take it for some reason. And obviously, if you'd like to talk to me more, I'm more than happy to jump on a call so I can understand and tailor something specifically for you. But if it's just a self-modulated work through the program, it's an incredibly powerful program that will arm you with all the tools that you need to start becoming more secure, manage your emotions more, regulate your emotions better, and start attracting the secure partners so that you never have to deal with emotionally unavailable partners ever again. who would like that? I know I would.
Definitely. That is so helpful. It has been wonderful talking to you today. It is so enlightening and so rich in what we can learn. And anyone else that who are listening to this or watching this, please do feel free to contact Tzara here for more information. And if you wanted to know the course that she's doing, feel free to actually check out the link that I'm going to put into the show note tonight. Thank you so much again for being our guest today and sharing your wisdom with us. It has been such a pleasure working with you.
Been wonderful, and thank you for letting me be part of this community. It's just really, really wonderful. I love the work that you're doing, and yeah, it's been a pleasure sharing my heartbeat with you. So thank you.
Thank you once again. Thank you for our audience and our listener for joining us today on Wisdom Wednesday, where we are here to support you through the highs and lows. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.